You can become allergic to anything at any time, anywhere, at any age. It is a warning driving life-saving training all across the state.
Today, healthcare staff learn how to respond to anaphylaxis, a severe allergic reaction that can turn deadly in minutes. Staff at Amplify Health by Dillon are now training to recognize anaphylaxis and use epinephrine in an emergency. For 3 Wisconsin families, severe allergic reactions turned deadly. Dillon, Hannah, and Andrew.
We decided right then and there in the hospital that we were going to do everything in our power to make a difference.
Dillon Miller, son of George and Angel Miller, died after he was stung by a bee and went into anaphylaxis in 2014. For Hannah's family, a similar loss.
Hannah called and she said, "I must have eaten something with peanut. I need you to come be with me."
Hannah Glass, a 19-year-old college student, knew she had a peanut allergy nearly all her life. She mistakenly ate peanut flour.
She lost consciousness and collapsed.
Families say these reactions can turn deadly fast.
And it can be fatal in 1 to 15 minutes.
And training is designed to prevent that, with staff learning to recognize the signs and use an EpiPen before it's too late. The goal is to act before first responders even arrive, but this training wasn't always possible. The Muellers' advocacy led to Dillon's law passed in Wisconsin in 2017.
Anyone who has had the training can carry and administer an epinephrine autoinjector to someone they feel is having an anaphylactic reaction.
Before that, only schools or businesses could carry epinephrine. They say it's already saving lives, but access still isn't everywhere. A bill in the U.S. House would expand that access nationwide.
It is a bipartisan, life-saving legislation that needs to happen today.
And in Madison, another push after the death of a college student in 2024. Andrew Mueller didn't know he had a peanut allergy. His reaction turned deadly. His family is now pushing for a bill that would require first responders in Wisconsin to carry and be trained to use epinephrine. They say the goal is expanding access before the next emergency. Well, since Dillon's law passed, the Muellers say 23 lives have been saved.
Let's get back to